over the times. However, my background is a little different than what Guy has had in his. One thing that we did have in common, and that I'm super passionate about, you'll hear about this later, is that I got started really young in the 8th grade, involved in the FFA. Not that I wasn't already super passionate about agriculture because of how I grew up, but I feel like that really was the piece that made me into what I am today as far as advocacy goes. I got involved in the 8th grade with the Pillion FFA chapter. I have to rep my home chapter. Was a member all through high school, was a chapter officer, went on to become a state officer later on in time. But again, that kind of differs from the childhood that Guy experienced.
We've always had cows from the time I was little, but we never was on I wouldn't say a production standpoint until 2012 when I graduated college. It was always a plan of mine, and we started building the herd in 2012 on just a small amount of land we had at the time. At that point in time, we had 18 or 20 acres. We started with 5 mama cows, and since then we've done a lot of expanding. But I had a lot of experience in FFA and stuff when I was in high school. I was vice president my junior year, president my senior year. We was involved in the swine show in York County. So there's a lot of background there. I helped a lot of people on farms around home, baling hay and cutting hay and all. So it wasn't anything new to me.
As far as our advocacy through the years go, I mentioned earlier that I was a chapter FFA officer. I went on to become a state FFA officer, which was something that really solidified what I would later on do as far as my occupation goes. One of my favorite jobs that I had back in 2014, I went to work for Clayton Raw Farms in Lexington, South Carolina. Now it's very different than what I grew up with. I grew up in row crops, so I got to get my toes wet into the vegetable production side. That was super interesting. I not only got to do the day-to-day stuff as far as payroll and the finances go, I got to experience the trucking industry, and that was a whole new ball game. I got to experience working with migrant workers. I got to experience actually helping that farm establish a certified organic program. That was a way bigger project than I thought it would have been. It was really awesome. When I was at Clemson, this is Guy's favorite job that I had, by the way. When I was at Clemson, I worked for Clemson Blue Cheese. Mind you, I don't like blue cheese, but it was an awesome job getting to see those products go from raw materials to finished products in just a small amount of time. Guy loved it so much because he loved the way I smelled when I came home every evening.
I picked her up from work one day, and when she got in the truck, I said, I won't do that anymore.
But that was a cool job as well. I worked for Clemson Cooperative Extension with Lexington 4-H in 2015 under Leona Parr. I think she's living in Ransdale now. That was an awesome experience as well. I got to experience a whole nother realm opposite of FFA. I won't say opposite because they're very similar, but different than FFA in perspective. And I think that really helped me decide not only that I wanted a career in agricultural education, but that working with youth was something I was really geared towards. And then the last job I had before I took on a more permanent career, I worked for the Department of Agriculture, interned with the Department of Agriculture for a little while back in 2016. I split my time between specialty crops and the farm to institution, farm to school program. Those were awesome. Again, you can kind of see the correlation when it comes to the education and working with youth there.
All right, so in the picture here, you see that's obviously that's me on it's pretty much an antique forage harvester that we used in the graduate research when I was getting my plant environmental science master's degree at Clemson. But all my research was based in hay production, forage production. That's all preliminary sensor technology that we started using to develop a hay yield monitor that had an approved patent in 2016 or 17. Myself and Dr. Kendall Kirk and several others were listed on it. Won't go into a lot of detail on it, but what it did is on the tongue of the baler, there was a set of sensors that looked down at a windrow, and it would measure the cross-sectional area of the windrow, and in this picture here, it's a kind of a crude picture, but there's a sensor on the wheel, so it will tell you when the lug nut on the rim past that sensor, it would give you the distance traveled, which would correlate cross-sectional area, distance traveled to give you a volume, and that would give you throughput. And then we had a GPS unit on there where you could correlate the volume going through the baler to the weight of the hay. So we developed yield maps with I think it was a less than 10% margin of error. And then we also implemented moisture content into it to get dry mass and wet mass per acre. There's another, this one is for a provisional patent that Kendall Kirk and myself developed. It was a round bell weighing system using a pressure transducer. But it was specific to a John Deere hay baler with a hydraulic bell kicker. There's a pressure transducer on the bell kicker, and when it would read points every millisecond, and when the pressure would spike, when you charted the numbers, when the pressure, you could see a spike on the chart, and that number right there correlated to the bale weight. We weighed 3,000 or 4,000 bales in 2 summers and correlated within a less than 3% margin of error. But here is the patent, the provisional patent and the actual United States patent. I was very involved with the Ag Met Club when I was in Clemson. And for all this, there's a whole lot more to the presentation than this as far as the research went. And we presented in New Orleans in 2015 at the American Society of Agricultural and Biological Engineers conference. I think there was 20 some odd papers that went along with this work.
So with those types of research and advocacy that we've tried to build throughout our careers and pre-careers, Guy and I, upon our marriage, we didn't exactly inherit a large swatch of land to start our own agricultural production on. That would have been awesome. It would have been the best thing ever, but we didn't. So it's something that we're kind of working on now. We'll kind of tell you a little bit about what we do as far as our full-time jobs go, and then how we're working to grow our own family operation. As far as me, I work for Rock Hill Schools. I'm an ag teacher. I love it. I worked in middle school for a little while, which is super scary. It's very scary. But for the past 3 years, I've been with Rock Hill Schools. I teach grades 10 through 12. We have animals on campus. You can see one of my favorites here. Her name is Fern. The kids love it. We have goats, we have chickens, we have ducks. I have a student with a proposal for me when I get back to work on Monday to show some dairy cows. I'm very excited. And this is awesome for us just because if you know anything about Rock Hill, you know we are somewhat associated as a suburb of Charlotte. A lot of my students don't have the opportunity to have animals or even large areas of land to grow anything at home. So I have awesome administration that allows us to do those kinds of things on campus. It is truly an honor to be able to work for people like that really respect ag the way that we do. In addition to that, the animals we have on campus, I'm able to coach students in various different competitions. You can see on the board I've got my tractor driving team that competed last month. I've got a gentleman in our poultry judging competition. The last time we were able to have it in person. We really enjoy being able to compete, but that's not the entire picture. The big picture is not only do they have the education piece in the classroom, they also have the FFA and my favorite part, which is their SAE programs. Their SAE stands for Supervised Agricultural Experience. Every student that is involved in the FFA is encouraged to create what we call an SAE project. I've got some pictures of my favorite ones here on the board. A student that is in charge of our goat herd on campus, that is her SAE project, is in dairy goat production. I've got a student that is in charge of our laying hens. That gentleman really loves what he does because not only does he get to care for the chickens every single day, he gets to sell eggs every single week and he gets to put money in his pocket. So not only is he seeing the agricultural work involved but he also sees some of the glories of being able to turn profits. And my favorite one, just because I am an ag teacher, is hopefully one of my future ag teachers. I had a senior that just graduated reading to our 4K program at a local elementary school. She's actually reading the Ag in the Classroom book of the month. She came in every month until COVID kind of put a damper on our restrictions. She came in every month and she read to these 4K students the Ag book of the month, trying to start them from a very young age as far as understanding where their food, fiber, and shelter comes from.
All right. So my career, I've been working for New Indy Container Board for a year. If anybody knows anything about it, it's a paper mill in Rock Hill, but I'm not at that paper mill. They've got a satellite mill in Union County in Jonesville, South Carolina, where we buy the raw material. We unload the pulp wood, run it through a chipper, and then it ends up getting trucked back to Rock Hill. So it's highly relatable to the agricultural field, because it's a food and fiber, or not food, but fiber industry. But right here it's just kind of a basic idea of what we do. You know, you come in with the raw material, goes in the chipper, goes out in the truck, and the area right here in the middle, that's the paper mill. That I have no idea what goes on there. Don't really want to know. But it comes out to be liner board, container board, press board to make boxes. They used to make white paper, but or coated paper in the magazines or thing in the past. So had they not changed to cardboard, they probably wouldn't be there anymore. So
that kind of leads us to our favorite part. Like we already said, we didn't exactly inherit a large area of land to have a production farm on. Like I said, we have throughout our relationship had a small herd of cattle that we are actively growing as of now. About 2 years ago, when I was very, very, very pregnant with our 2-year-old, we acquired 100 acres directly across from where we live, which for us I think is kind of, in a way, been our big break when it comes to getting into production ag, which we're not there yet, but we will be. On this area, we plan to finish fencing it in and run a larger cow-calf operation until we can kind of converge into a stocker operation. I'll let Guy talk a little bit more about that.
all right, so the end goal for our farm is the field you see here. It's about 55 acres. There's another 45 on the backside behind, where the camera is. It was some scrubby timber. We had the timber cut not too long ago, and we're in the process of getting everything fenced in. It took almost 2 years to get a survey on the land, and I wasn't putting fence on it without a survey. But we got the timber cut, and that's pretty well going to pay for fencing the land. It will not pay for stumping and clearing the land, but we're going to fence in the big field first, which we're in the process of doing, to get some cattle on there, and then clear a little bit along and get that established, and be able to keep cows off of it. But presently, we cut hay off of this field to feed what we've got now. We've got about 30 in a herd, but not only cutting hay there, we've cut hay at many different farms for many different people. Most of it's been contract work or rent. We cut on shares for people. And then we've got one guy that we cut his farm for a long time. He just wants his place cleaned up, and we get everything for free. And the only thing he requires is bush hog at the end of the year. Well, we can do that. But at the end goal is to end up trying to have a stocker operation, try to find a little bit of land to rent, and try to grow a few crops. And in my opinion, and may find out differently, you can be more successful if you grind your own feed. I want to try to develop my own feed rations and grow my own feed and process it myself, so that way I know exactly what the cattle are getting. And at the end of that point, Cameron's idea, what she would love to do, is be able to sell our own meat, market our own steers. People are big into knowing where their food comes from. So I think that's a great idea, and hopefully in the next few years we'll be at that point.
As far as our advocacy through Farm Bureau goes, we got involved with Farm Bureau. Well, I've been involved with Farm Bureau as a youth ambassador way back in the day, but as a couple, we got involved with Farm Bureau in 2017. We had some friends who were like, hey, you guys should really get involved wow, this is a great organization. So we did, and we have not looked back ever since. Not only have we gained a lot of good friends, but we've learned a lot about different farming operations throughout the state, throughout the country. We have gotten to speak to legislators from our county and from the state level, even from the national level, not only about agriculture, but just as human beings. I think I had somebody tell me earlier, just keep in mind, the person next to you puts their pants on the same way you do. So that's something that we've had to learn throughout the way. We've had numerous different occasions where we were able to grow our YF&R, Young Farmer and Rancher chapter in York County. One of the coolest things that I think that we do is that every year we hold something called the Syrian Comer Shoot for Agriculture. This was a fundraiser that we established in an honor memorial for a YF&R member that was on our committee who passed away. When she passed away in 2013, a year or so later, they established a 4K. But very quickly, what they learned is that in our community anyways, farmers don't really want to run. So in 2018, we had a proposal, let's change things up, let's do a skeet shoot. People might really enjoy that. And we were very right. It's been really successful. This past August was our 4th annual Syrian Comer Shoot for Ag. The coolest thing that I think that we do here is with our proceeds, with our earnings every year, we turn around and we give scholarships to students who are advancing their education in agriculture. And that doesn't have to be an ag ed degree, it doesn't have to be an ag mech degree. They can be going to York Technical College to get a trades degree, as long as they can explain to us in their application process how they intend to use that for the betterment of agriculture. And so far, we have been extremely blown away by the awesome applications that we have gotten throughout the last however many years since we've been doing this.
Now, this is 4 years. It's 4 years of skeet shooting.
Yeah.
Prior to that, it was the 5K ran for 2 or 3 years. Everything has been successful, but like Cameron said, farmers don't run. If you see me run, you better run the other way because something's
There'll be
happening.
something behind us, yeah.
But as far as the skeet shoot goes, that kind of appealed to the group more that we were trying to appeal to. People love it, and it's been, like Cameron said, super successful. We have been able to give at least 2 scholarships every year. Depending on how much money we take in, a scholarship can range anywhere from $1,500 to $3,500.
Yeah, this year we gave 2 scholarships
Two
to 2 worthy individuals
$3,500s.
for $3,500.
Yeah, so it's $7,000.
That was awesome. Real quickly, we kind of want to wrap up for you. Guy and I were able to serve on the state YF&R committee back in 2018 to 2020. Guy served as our committee chair. It was a really good experience for us. We enjoyed our time on the committee, and that is what really gave us an idea that we wanted to compete for this competition, just because we want to kind of display our advocacy for ag. And this is the moral of our whole story. This is the ending for us. I think the whole reason that we want this agricultural life, not only for ourselves, but for our child, is because of the grassroots that it applies. We're talking about the future for our children, not just my child, but for all of our children. I think it was said at lunch earlier that if we don't leave a substantial agricultural legacy for our children, then what are we leaving on? So,
That's right.
but I think that's all we've got. Are there any questions?
I'm curious about your patents.
Okay.
What they've done since you had that.
Since we got the patent and everything approved, Dr. Kirk, he has been in contact with companies like John Deere and New Holland, tried to get them to bite on it. But I think right now, as far as yield monitoring, precision agriculture, companies like John Deere, they're more focused on grain production instead of hay production. Hay's so variable; it's hard to. Which, like I say, we were very successful with our margin of error and all, but as far as being a yield monitor going across the country to be applied, it might not be quite feasible yet. It will be, but that just gives us a baseline. It gives us a baseline to work off of.
I have a question. When you grew up in York, did you grow up on a farm or no? Something came to you later?
Well, we always had land and we always had cows. It just wasn't like production.
Okay.
But we've had cows, we've raised chickens. been slaughtering hogs since I was probably 4. So,
What do you do at your at the place you work with the chippers, and where's the wood mostly come from?
I'm a operator. Either I run the crane or the chipper itself. The wood, we just got different dealers that brings wood from around. Most of it comes out of Union, Cherokee, York County. 'Cause from where our little satellite mill is, it's 64 miles from Bowwaters to there, or New Indy and Rock Hill. And depending on where the logger's cutting, if they're closer to go to Rock Hill, then they won't take it at our mill. But if it's closer, most of our wood comes from within 10 or 15 miles of the mill, and they've been pouring in the past couple weeks.
I got one more question. What do y'all feel like the most beneficial part of being involved with young farmers and ranchers has been for you?
I don't know if I can speak for both of us, but for me, it's really been networking. And there are so many people that we've met, and we've got to experience their farm experience because we met them. I've met hemp farmers, and I didn't know anything about hemp before I met a hemp farmer. You know, you don't know the struggles that people in different areas of ag have until you talk to people in different areas of ag. So for me, I would say it's been networking. Do you have?
I have to agree with that 100%. Especially like being involved with the wife and our state committee. One of you people like Chris and Alicia, and Joe. Well, I knew Joe from college, but we have met and learned a lot about a lot of people, and like Cameron said, their experiences and their shortcomings and their fights that they have to go through to be successful. And I feel like it makes us better people because of it.
It makes us better advocates for ag when we understand the whole picture and not just our piece.
A question for you. I noticed you seem to be quite involved in animals at your school, even though your earlier life seemed more row crops and vegetable stuff. What made you? Because a lot of ag teachers don't fool with animals, and you like to jump all in.
So when I was student teaching, getting ready to start teaching, I student taught at West Oka High School in Oconee County, and they had an awesome animal operation going on there. They had horses on campus, they had cows on campus, they had goats on campus, and I loved it. I loved every second of it. And we still have full production greenhouses. We've got 2 greenhouses on campus, and we have a spring sale and a fall sale. Our fall sale got canceled because of COVID this year, but our spring sale is still full production. We love it. However, I found that in our area, which is not rural, at least in Rock Hill it's not, my students have really been drawn to the animal production. So I've tried to kind of cater to what the kids are really telling me they like.
That's our time for Guy and Cameron. Thank you guys for coming in and thank you everyone for listening. We appreciate you attending. We're going to have about 2 minutes and then we will start with our next contestant. Introduce you if you want to sit on the front row, and then I'll call you up in over here. Yep.
No, that's it. No, that's it. They said that he ain't got John coming out there for an evaluation.
That's fine, that's perfect timing, okay.
I just leave. No,
Say it again, I'm sorry.
I'll introduce you and then call you back up. All right, thank you for coming back for round 2 of the Excellence in Agriculture Awards competition. I'm happy to introduce Katie Gibba from McCormick County. She will be our next presenter. Here's your clicker to go forward and backward, and there's a laser pointer.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Well, hi everyone, I'm Katie Gibba, and I am representing McCormick County today. So I am an education and recruitment specialist for the South Carolina Governor's School for Agriculture, where I recruit students in the agriculture and life science pathways. I consider myself to be a rural and underrepresented populations advocate. I got my start in a small town in rural Alabama. I graduated with 30 students in my graduating class, and no, it was not a private school, it was a public school. My family has a small hay operation and a honeybee business, so I've always been somewhat connected to agriculture, but it wasn't until I reached the high school level that I really got involved in agriculture and FFA. In fact, when I was in high school, I was very athletic and I did a lot of sports, and there came a moment where I had to decide if I was going to go into sports for college or if I was going to do agriculture. Well, I chose agriculture, and in fact, one of my coaches told me that I was throwing away every opportunity that I could ever want. Luckily, I did not believe her, and I actually received every opportunity through agriculture, and I'm very grateful for that. When I was growing up, I had this idea in my mind that in order to go into agriculture, I had to leave my hometown, which is ironic seeing that I lived in a predominantly agriculturally based area. So when I went into college, I had every intention of going into agriculture education until I took a random sociology class. The class was called Rural Sociology. And within this class, we learned about agri-food systems, agricultural technology, and how innovation changes our rural education systems in our rural communities. I learned about local food systems, food hubs, deserts in the state of South Carolina. And I realized that I loved agriculture. I just had a little different perspective on it and wanted to approach it differently than my peers. So I didn't do ag ed or agribusiness or ag communications. I consider myself to be a rural sociologist. So I graduated from Clemson University in my undergraduate studies in 2017, and then I continued those studies into agricultural education for my graduate program, where I did my thesis in linking educators and rural communities, developing place consciousness through agriculture education. And if you're not familiar with place consciousness, what it means is basically teaching people how to be where they are, right? So ironically, I had this idea that I had to leave my home to go into agriculture and to be an asset, right? So what I wanted to study is why we think that, and also how do ag ed programs help negate that issue that our students often have in our typical education systems within our rural communities. Through my occupation, I am the coordinator and outreach, I'm coordinator of outreach and student services for the South Carolina Governor's School for Agriculture. If you haven't heard of it yet, it is a brand new agency in the state of South Carolina. We're actually the third governor's school focused on agriculture. And what we do is we help students return back to their hometowns. So we are growing students to be future leaders in the agriculture industry and return back to their rural communities. I was tasked with creating an admissions and recruitment department through this program. I work daily with agriculturally focused organizations and promote agricultural education at the secondary and post-secondary level. A big part of my job is making sure our students are exposed to the 230 different jobs within the agriculture industry. And lastly, I have the opportunity to travel all across the state of South Carolina and the nation to work with agriculture professionals and make sure that they know about our school and our agency. So here are a few snapshots from presentations to national conventions to FFA shows, livestock shows, and state fairs. If it has something to do with agriculture, I want to be there. I want to make sure our students are there, and I want to make sure that I'm speaking with the people within the industry. As far as personal involvement, I have been involved in agriculture for a very long time. I am a former state officer, former national officer candidate. I've served on the state nominating committee and also organized state-level competitions for the National FFA organization. As far as college involvement, I've been involved in the Rural Sociology Club, Collegiate FFA, and Collegiate Farm Bureau. When I was in college, I had the privilege of working under my rural sociology advisor in several different research areas. He was actually in the College of Agriculture and Life Science college and department at Clemson University for a long time. So most of his research actually has to do with agriculture, even though he's in sociology now. So we study South Carolina aquaculture futures, using local food banks to further promote sustainability in agriculture, community development in the opportunity zones. And if you're not familiar with what an opportunity zone is, it's essentially an area in the state of South Carolina that needs to increase their economic development. Unfortunately, a lot of those are agriculturally based areas, and they are considered more the poorer areas in the state of South Carolina. What's unique about that is there are 135 different opportunity zones in the state, and most of those do not have ag ed programs. Currently, for agriculture, I'm a member of the Rural Sociological Society. I am a Rural Redefined board member, which is essentially an organization that connects rural women And then currently I am the McCormick County President. So as far as impact on agriculture, I have the opportunity every single day to interact with people within the industry and also promote the industry. Most of my job comes down to recruitment and admissions. So on a daily basis, I am coordinating preview days, orientations, move-in days for our agency and our school. Through the agency, I also have created and implemented our first Halloween festival in 2019. We are on our third year now, and we're very excited. But it serves as, agritourism for the state. We do a petting zoo, we do farm tours, we have a pumpkin patch, and this past year we had almost 400 individuals participate in that Halloween festival, which is really exciting for the county of McCormick. I coordinated the first 5K scholarship program at the school. We had over 200 participants and raised over $2,000 to provide a scholarship for our students to go into an agriculturally based academic program in college. Additionally, one of the big tasks on my job, as I mentioned before, is making sure that our students are aware of the different jobs in agriculture. So I took that a step further and created a Careers in Agriculture blog where we highlight different industry professionals in the ag industry in South Carolina. And lastly, recently I have created a social media platform in hopes that it will turn into a nonprofit called Take Your Place. Take Your Place is about creating social and cultural capital in rural communities through remote work, entrepreneurship, and transformational leadership. And a big part of that is making sure that our rural communities and our agriculture industry professionals are aware of the different opportunities for them in entrepreneurship and remote work. I have 3 different platforms as far as agriculture issues that I'm very passionate about, and I do approach them from more of a sociological perspective. From the national level, sustainable agriculture, we've all heard about, we're all aware about, and there are a lot of different scientific data, there are a lot of perspectives, a lot of points to be made about that. But what I like to focus on are the conversations surrounding sustainable agriculture, especially within the industry, because sometimes I feel like that we forget that we are actually working together. We're not competing against one another. So I would like to personally see those conversations change and for us to build more bridges around sustainable agriculture. In the state, food deserts are an incredible opportunity for our local farmers. So a food desert basically means that a person has to travel more than 10 miles to access a grocery store. And in the state of South Carolina, they're traveling much further than that. So the only time they really get access to food is at gas stations. In South Carolina, there are 230,000 people that are in food deserts in 21 counties. And just to put that into perspective, that's $311 million that goes outside of their local communities. So if we can help negate that a little bit, we can bring that money back to our local communities and our local farmers. Lastly, food hubs at the local level. You'll kind of see all of these, they connect together. But the food hubs are really important. If you aren't aware of what a food hub is, it connects local farmers and consumers. It's kind of the middleman. Sometimes the middleman is seen as, the bad guy. But in this case, it's a really great opportunity because they're not taking anything away from their farmer. They're actually supporting and providing additional resources for them, such as accounting and marketing. It also gives them a different avenue to directly sell to the consumer without taking away from farmers markets. So goals in the future, I would like to pursue my doctorate in rural education or rural business administration. Those are 2 different avenues that I would like to take to further rural consulting so that I can help connect these different systems within rural communities and specifically agriculture. I would like to do my time at the South Carolina Farm Bureau State Level Committee. I would like to serve on that committee as well. And then additionally, increase McCormick membership. We've had a great year and, we've been really involved. So I'm really excited to see where that goes in the future. As far as leadership experience goes, I broke it down in kind of these 3 different categories: Farm Bureau, agriculture, and community. So I'll just highlight some of the most meaningful opportunities that I've had in Farm Bureau. When I first joined McCormick County, I started off as the Young Farmers and Ranchers Chair, and then recently became the McCormick County President. In agriculture, I'm a lifelong supporter of the National FFA organization, and I've seen firsthand how it can change your life as a student, as an agriculture student specifically. And then the role redefined board member position that I hold, it's just really cool to be able to talk to women that are passionate about agriculture, rural broadband, and rural communities. So I love connecting with those ladies on a national and global level as well. And then lastly, community. I do serve on the Small Business Advisory Board in Greenwood, which is another great opportunity to learn about the different entrepreneurship opportunities in small communities, but also within agriculture as well. And then I had the opportunity to serve a congressional internship and have my voice heard as an agriculturalist for our local counties. So, and now I will take questions.
I have a question. As you've been working with high school aged youth and your work at the new governor's school, you said that you're working to send them back to their homes. What have they said is some of the reasons why they may or may not want to go back?
So with our students, the most common theme is they want to go back. And, you know, a challenge we had was having their parents send them off to a residential school because they're so afraid that they're not going to come back. And the message that we like to voice is we're teaching them how to go back and be successful and be fruitful in their communities. Most of our students want to go back to home. They love home. They go home every single weekend. So.
Is there anything you found that needs to improve for them to be able to have the life they envision at home?
Yes. So this is, you know, a huge issue. Just our rural communities in general. That's why I really believe the remote work can help, specifically our agriculture community, because our students see that there aren't opportunities. That's the vision they have in their head. A lot of our students now aren't as connected as our older generations and our older populations. A lot of these organizations, local ones, are dying. And so through the remote work, if they see the opportunities that are available to them for them to work from home or, you know, work more remotely in these different positions, they can actually stay in their communities, make more money, and then contribute directly to the local economy.
I'm interested a little more in your degree with the sociology and the ag all mixed together and stuff. What exactly was that, and how I'll just give me a little more information on that. It's kind of intriguing to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I had one of my professors sit me down in his office one day. He said, "Katie, you got a fierce passion for agriculture and an interesting way of going about it." So I've kind of just held on to that. So when I took my first sociology class and decided to change everything about my career and my future, the reason I did that is because we were talking about these systems in agriculture. I knew I didn't want to be a teacher. I knew I didn't really want to go into communications and work for a corporation or anything like that. I wanted to talk about the systems. I wanted to talk about these agri-food systems and what happens if we introduce a new technology into agriculture and into the community. How does the community perceive that? So classes that I took were based around rural community development, extension, food hubs, food deserts. So I was always still involved in agriculture, just from a different angle.
And could you, your job blog that you started, how do you go about finding the jobs? Because, you know, everybody's always interested in ag jobs, but a lot of people want to work in the field. And
Yeah.
where to go find them? I'm just curious how you go get your information and stuff.
Yeah, so with the Careers in Agriculture blog, what we primarily do is highlight different individuals within the industry, and then we give them the option to tell us if they have open job positions, what they're looking for in the future, what especially, you know, our students need to do in order to, you know, take on that position or a different role at their company.
I have a quick change to make that better? And what type of policy proposals are in place to do that?
Yeah, so with the food hubs, if you're not familiar, there are actually 10 different food hubs in the state of South Carolina. And they have a great foundation for giving us a national model for our rural communities. Because when you create a food hub and you put it in a local community, the food is going to the residents. It's coming from your local farmers, and they're getting access again to that accounting, that marketing, the business side that sometimes our local farmers lose out on. And they're also being educated on how to protect themselves as farmers and how to get more for their dollar. As far as what needs to be done, we definitely need to be more engaged, especially organizations like Farm Bureau, making stronger connections with those other networks. There's a food hub network in South Carolina, being more familiar with our food deserts and looking at agriculture as an entire system. Unfortunately, I've been on both sides, and I've seen that we like to compete a lot, which is wonderful. But sometimes we forget that we all have the common goal, and that's to feed everyone.
I'm not a judge here or anything. I've got a question. How do you get the word out in the state that we've got this opportunity at this governor's school to the kids?
Okay, so that's my job. So I've been on the road for the last 4 months, and what we do, anything from non-traditional to traditional recruitment we're doing in-class presentations, we're doing virtual presentations, we're at different organizations like this. If they have a meeting, we're presenting there. We're talking to our legislators. We have an email marketing campaign, anything like that. It's all and everything that we're trying to do. It's a really great opportunity for the students in South Carolina, and we also accept out-of-state students as well. So if you fall right on that line, or if you know anyone that falls on that line.
Do you try to target any students that are really not agriculture or grown up in agriculture environment?
Yeah, great question. So it's pretty split at the school, right? We have your students that grew up on a farm. They know everything about agriculture. They were basically born on a tractor. And then we have the students who just have this general interest in plants and animals, and they've never had the opportunity. And those students tend to find us because they're very engineering focused. They're very hands-on learners, project-based, and that's what a lot of what we do at the school. And so they kind of find us. Something that has been really intriguing is we get a lot of your private school and homeschooling students that don't have traditional agriculture programs, so they don't have the same opportunities as your traditional ag ed program kids. So we don't necessarily target them. They find us, and we show them where their place is at the school. And it's really neat to see those two different types of students kind of mesh on campus.
What's your capacity now that you can handle?
We have 64 students currently, and then we will grow to 100 in this upcoming year.
What's the goal?
The goal is to hover around that 200 mark, but we can't get to that 200 mark with our current housing availability, so we'll have to build a brand new dorm. But the reason we want to do that, if you're not familiar, it's 1,300 acres of property and 72 buildings. It's huge. Back in the day, it was one vote away from becoming Clemson University. So a lot of times people ask us, you can hold 500 to 1,000 kids. Why don't you do that? It's more opportunity. But we want to keep it small. We want to make sure that these students, when they walk across the stage, that we know where they're going, what they're doing, and that they're prepared. So we want to keep that personal learning going.
What would that criteria be when it gets more competitive to go to the school? How will you select who gets to go and who doesn't?
So it's fairly competitive right now. So we have a full application-based process. So they have to turn in 3 different recommendations, a personal essay, counselor evaluation, transcript, and go through an interview process. So it's fairly selective right now. In the future, it's going to get more selective. I've seen that just over the past 3 years, how we've grown, and as the word's getting out and the branding and everything. But I don't really see how it could get more selective as far as in the application process. But we do want to keep it more holistic, so that's why we do require everything. Because I like to say that you can have a 4.0 student and they've only taken one class, and that doesn't tell you a lot about the student. So.
I'm curious as to why are you targeting out-of-state kids and you only have 100 spots? It's not you don't have 100 kids out of South Carolina interested in that program?
There are a couple challenges with that. So it's not necessarily that we're targeting out-of-state students, it's that we're 15 minutes from the Georgia line. And some of our students live on the North Carolina line, and they go to a South Carolina school, but they technically have a North Carolina address. So legislation decided to allow 10% for out-of-state students. And I will say in the first year it was a challenge because if you don't know, we did a complete rebranding with the school. So we're brand new with that. And currently all tuition is free. It will always be free for in-state tuition, but we do see out-of-state tuition having an actual dollar amount with that.
You said, if I didn't misunderstand you when you started, you felt like you needed to move away from home, but yet your job now is trying to get kids to go back home. Where do you see yourself returning?
Great question. Yeah, so you could say I'm a little hypocritical. No. So that was a journey, a self journey. I thought I had to leave. I thought to be successful, I had to go somewhere else. And what's crazy about that is everything I wanted to do is right there in my hometown. So when I when I went to McCormick, my dad got on the map and he said, you know, there's only like 1,000 people in there, right? And I was like, I know, it's gonna be great. So yeah, I returned back to a small town, maybe not my hometown, but I want to continue working in rural communities. And I am returning back to Alabama when I get my doctorate. It's actually through the University of West Alabama. So kind of full circle. Yeah.
I mean, we're glad to have you.
And I've been here for almost 10 years, so I am putting in my time as a South Carolina resident. So. Any more questions?
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
And everyone, we will take just a brief intermission and we will come back in about 2 minutes to begin with the final presentation for today. Introduce you and then call you up to the front once
Okay.
we're ready to get started. Ladies and gentlemen, if you will find your seats, we are ready for the final presentation of this year's Excellence in Ag Awards competition. I'm going to call to the front Michael Plumley from Newberry County, and he will be our final presenter for today. Clicker, forward, backward, laser.
All right, appreciate it. Thank you for that introduction, Heather. I'm happy to be here today and kind of present a little bit about my farm story and background and some of the things that I do and plan on doing through Farm Bureau for the Excellence of Ag. So a little bit about my personal background. I grew up in Lexington, South Carolina. I didn't grow up in a farming family per se, but I did grow up around agriculture. My dad worked in the agricultural irrigation industry, so kind of by default, I grew up working in the agricultural irrigation industry, and that was kind of my first exposure growing up around ag. So with that being said, I have had family. If I were a full-time farmer, I'd be a fifth-generation farmer in South Carolina. My family still owns and farms some of the land that my great-great-grandfather initially farmed in Newberry County in the Piedmont. So with that being said, throughout high school and a lot of college, I did have a lot of background and experience working on the farm, where I worked for one of my cousins on the family farm in Newberry, where we grew cotton, wheat, soybeans, corn, raised beef cattle and turkeys. So through that experience for me, it was very eye-opening, and I learned a lot and got a really good foundation in ag growing up. So I went to Clemson for my undergraduate degree, where I majored in ag, mech, and business, graduated in 2013. I felt like when I graduated from Clemson, I wanted to keep pursuing my education and learn as much as I could about ag. It really interested me. So I did a Master's of Science degree at University of Georgia out at Tifton, where I majored in agronomy and worked in corn and peanuts. And then I went from there on to get a PhD at Mississippi State University, where I worked in agronomy for the cotton specialist at Mississippi State and got a minor in entomology. So through my education, I feel like I've gotten a very good background in ag and something that I really do enjoy, and hopefully have bettered my knowledge through that. So a little bit about my family and personal life. I've been married for 6 years to my wife, Allison. And then during the pandemic, we actually had our first child, a little girl that's now 19 months old. In my spare time, I'm like about every other redneck in South Carolina. I love to hunt and fish. And so I do a lot of that with my brother-in-law whenever we have time. So as far as my ag involvement, a lot of it really stems through the career that I've chosen in my job. I'm currently employed by Clemson University. I'm an assistant professor of agronomy, but I also serve as the state corn and soybean extension specialist or agronomist. So a typical day for me, I kind of split my time up depending on my appointment. So right now I spend about 75% of my time doing extension duties and 25% research. And some of the things that I do with that particular position is I work with corn and soybean farmers across the state to hopefully answer issues that they may have with their production systems, develop recommendations, and kind of be a source of information for them if they need me. I also conduct applied corn and soybean research, which means that the research that I do, I hope I can take a direct answer to the farmer rather than being several years down the line. I train and have graduate students. I've currently got 4 that are working on degrees with me. I do some trainings for different growers around the state, and then I write papers on some of the research that we do. So these are just a few pictures of kind of a day in the life of an extension specialist. Like I said, we do a lot of spraying and rating, plant on-farm variety trials, present at field days, and again, do some applied research. So that's my main job. I guess I've started a little side business to kind of further my interest in ag and what I get to be involved with on the weekends. So me and my brother-in-law, a few years ago, were talking about it and said we wanted to kind of get into the cob corn business a little bit, mainly for ourselves, but we said if we can make enough money to pay for the equipment, why not? So a couple of years ago, we started a business that we call M&M Deer Corn. We bought a picker and some gravity wagons and a little elevator, and we pick, bag, and sell cob corn to people throughout the region, and have since been able to purchase a few pieces of equipment and get that paid for. So again, it's something that I enjoy doing. It kind of connects me back to the farm and gets me out of the house on the weekend. My personal involvement in ag, again, a lot of my involvement comes from the career that I've chosen. There's not a day that goes by that I'm not in the field talking to a farmer or having something that's directly related to ag. when really that's where my passion is doing anything that's related to agriculture. Even on the weekends, I still have family and in-laws that farm. So weekends, holidays, I'm usually helping them or trying to do something around there with them on the weekends. So I still get my fix for farming. And through a lot of that, I'm able to maintain a relationship with farmers and other agriculturists through the state and the nation. So it really kind of comes full circle for me with that. I have presence with several different ag societies. I'm an active member in a few of them and frequently go to those and present. So kind of moving into my impact specifically on ag, you know, I was in school for a long time, but since I've become very involved with my local farm bureau, I've participated in writing letters to Congress and attended meetings with them. I also attend several local and state meetings. But right before COVID, I was able to have a chance to represent the Certified Crop Advisor Society in South Carolina. I went to D.C. and we went around to our local congressmen from South Carolina and talked and asked them to support agricultural research funding. I've talked with middle and high school students about careers in ag and the things that we do. More recently, I've developed a blog that we call South Carolina Crops, where we're able to maintain a website so that we can share information that's produced through Clemson with farmers so that they're able to have timely information whenever they need it. And then in the future, I'd like to promote my local agriculture from Newberry County through farm tours and maybe do some informational videos to help really kind of answer some of the misconceptions that a lot of the general public has. So again, these are just a few pictures when I went to Hill Day in DC in March of 2020, and then a screenshot of the blog that we put together this year. So in our application for this award, we were asked to kind of highlight 3 issues that we're facing in ag on the local, state, and national level. And so these are 3 things that I thought were really important and had a big impact on me, with the first being on a local level with ag literacy and education. I think this is extremely important. There's so many people that don't really understand where their food comes from. They hear different things and tend to believe it. They read too much stuff off of Facebook. So I think that through programs that we have, like Ag in the Classroom, where we're educating people at a young age, I think is good, and I really want to support that in the future. The second thing that I think I'm probably most passionate about would be at the state level, and it was kind of interesting that this was actually brought up this morning. I promise when I submitted my application, I had no idea this would be such a big issue at this meeting, but urban development encroaching on South Carolina ag areas. And I think I'm passionate about this just because I understand that South Carolina is a desirable place to live for people moving here. We're typically a small state agriculturally initially. We don't have the best infrastructure, and we're cramming all these people in. And so me having a small piece of land now, I see what the impact could be if other people come in and start converting that into more urban areas. And then the last being rural broadband accessibility. So previously at Clemson, before I took on corn and soybean role, I was doing precision ag. So I understand a lot of the precision and digital farming that we're seeing nowadays and the efficiency that we can get and some of the technologies that we're adopting. And really we're setting ourselves behind the 8 ball per se in South Carolina and really the whole nation as a whole if we don't have accessible internet for a lot of the growers, especially in the future. So to remain profitable and competitive on a national and world scale, I think this is something that we really need to pay attention to. So the issue that I wanted to highlight and kind of somewhat come up with a resolution for would be this urban development encroaching on South Carolina ag areas. And again, I'm passionate about this issue because I see it happening and I see the impact that it could have on me and my kids and grandkids one day. And things with increased land prices, urban growth, large surrounding cities. You know, if you look at South Carolina as a whole, we're typically not more than 45 minutes or an hour from any big metropolitan area. So we're really not that rural in some of our areas. I pulled some statistics and looked. Since 2001, we've lost 137,000 acres of farmland in South Carolina. So at that rate, you know, we're maybe 1-2 generations away from really probably not being able to farm a whole lot of big tracts in South Carolina anymore. So with having a child now, I see things a little bit different, but I'd like to give my child and their kids the opportunity to farm if they wished. So again, with my resolution, you know, it's obviously would be a lot of legwork and setting the structure up of this right, but I guess the general summary I have of it would be, we need to do more research on urban growth and projected areas of growth. We need to hone in on that, try to develop zones or what they consider urban growth boundaries to help protect and conserve some of the farmland that we have in the state. Again, work through Farm Bureau, grassroots approach. I think Farm Bureau would be an excellent entity to be able to set up a lot of this framework and kind of manage some of this farmland preservation in the future. So my goals for my career, Farm Bureau, and other organizations over the next 5 years, I'd love to continue learning about ag and building and developing my personal career. That way I can help everybody in South Carolina do that much of a better job with their operations. I like to continue improving and growing my personal farm business through acquiring land, equipment, and infrastructure. I'd like to increase my involvement in Farm Bureau at the county and state levels. Again, advocating for South Carolina ag, remaining sustainable, profitable, and available for future generations. And then I'd like to also get involved with non-ag groups. That way that when some issues come up, at least ag always has got a voice at the table. So some of the steps that I think would help me achieve this, again, continue to surround myself with people that have similar aspirations, so people in Farm Bureau. Learn and understand more about the process and the policy. That's probably my weakest aspect of me now is learning kind of the policy end of a lot of the issues that we face. And then to keep an open mind on non-traditional solutions for problems that we may face. So as far as my leadership experience, again, a lot of it's probably been a little bit more recent just because I have been gone from South Carolina for so long. But at the county level, I've been the YF&R chair in Newberry County since 2019. This year, I got on the board of directors and a voting delegate. We volunteered at the Ag Olympics at John Dillick Howe School this year. And then back when I graduated high school, I was actually able to win a scholarship through Lexington County Farm Bureau. At the state Farm Bureau level, again, through my job, I'm actually an advisor to the Soybean Feed, Grain, and Hay Committee on the state level. The past 2 years, I've been able to compete on the discussion meet. I was a finalist in 2019 and a winner last year. And then this year, me and my wife Allison were nominated for state YF&R committee. In agriculture in general, I've held several different positions in different organizations. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'm currently a certified crop advisor in South Carolina on the board for that. I'm the vice president of an applied soybean group that's national. I'm an editor for Agronomy Journal. And then I've held, like I mentioned, several different positions through school and different graduate student associations and even a fraternity in my undergrad. As far as my kind of leadership experience goes in the community, again, the cooking committee at a local church in Aiken, so anytime we have some sort of event at the church, I've helped with that. I've volunteered some at our home church in Newberry when they've had homecoming. I've been involved with different honor societies throughout school, so again, while I've been gone in school, I've still been very active and tried to do as best as I could, and even when at Clemson. So with that being said, that's kind of my story and where I came from and where my passion is in ag and how I see myself fitting into the Farm Bureau crowd. And hopefully I can continue to better myself so that I can help better the community in South Carolina. And working through Farm Bureau, again, I think is a great asset that we have at our disposal. So with that, I'll take any questions that y'all might have for me. So, I mean, we've come up with a pretty good system, but it's still very labor intensive. Since we started the business 3 years ago, how many bags we've done every year has increased. And I think hopefully we're going to finish bagging them up this week. But it's if you don't like to work, it's definitely not the right career to be into. So.
With your urban sprawl issues,
Mm-hmm.
And I'm with you on those. However, there's going to be a lot of folks in the state that are more on the bringing new industry in.
Right.
And having, the space to attract that. What do you say to that argument? How do we balance that?
Yep. So that's obviously going to be a huge issue. With South Carolina being a historically really conservative state, we're obviously promoting a lot of industry and bringing in that to South Carolina, and I don't have a problem with that. I think we'd be better off if we tried to consolidate some of our industry rather than stringing it out from the Port of Charleston all the way up to Holly Hill. If we can condense that some more, especially where there's really good productive farmland. And that's kind of what I was thinking, if we could go in and zone or determine where our more productive farmland is, what's the relation in that to ports and different infrastructure for the ag part of it. Could we then, maybe try to carve out a few things? And something else to think of is a lot of the people that are farming now or getting out of the older generation, they're passionate about the farm too and probably want to see it going. So if we were able to put something in where maybe, they could zone it differently, or just so that it wouldn't, get turned over at $15,000 an acre. Somebody, I'm not saying that if it's somebody's land and they want to sell it. But at the end of the day, I think sometimes people are forced into doing things because their neighbor's done it, if that makes sense. So.
Yeah, I was going to follow up on that same thing, I guess, because, Farm Bureau for a long time has been private property owner rights is a real big thing.
Right.
For the last longest time, and Farm Bureau is the number one thing. And, really all this kind of contradicts a lot of that because, the big stand is, it's my land, I do with it as I wish.
That's right.
So it's, figuring out some kind of compensation or something, I guess.
Yeah, and I agree with that completely, that, if you own private property or your kids are not interested in farming and want to sell land, that's definitely your right, and they ought to be able to do that. And I guess kind of my take on this was, even if we didn't necessarily zone something different, or maybe we would have like a tax incentive to maybe keep it in farmland rather than it going commercial, or some kind of benefit financially that, maybe a big Boeing or somebody would come in and say, well, I'd probably be better off building my big plant down here in the urban area rather than going out and converting farmland into a commercial place. So that's kind of the stance I get, and I agree completely that, I don't think it's any of our, or even Farm Bureau's stance to sit there and tell somebody what they can and cannot do with private property. But if Farm Bureau as a whole, which would be most of the people owning farmland, all came together and said, hey, I want to voluntarily put my piece of property into some sort of conservation easement or zone it as ag or whatever, I can ensure that my kids will have the right to farm and maybe their kids, and hopefully have some longevity with ag in South Carolina.
Who had the highest yields in the state? Where'd you see the best corn being used?
It's hard to say. It was some, up this way was really good. I cut a dryland corn plot up here that averaged about 195 in Loris. So it was pretty good corn all over the place. Didn't ever saw any bad, really. So.
Well, thank you,
All right.
Michael.
Appreciate it.
That concludes our Excellence in Agriculture Award presentations for today. Thank you again for coming. We appreciate your support of the Young Farmer and Rancher program. I'd like to invite all of you to come and also view our discussion meet competition. We'll have 2 separate semifinal rounds starting at 4 o'clock. Those will be in Kensington A and Kensington B. And then our final round of the competition starts at 5:15. Thank you. Have a great day. And if you would, I will convene with the judges in this room after we're done. So if everyone would please exit and chat in the hallway. Thank you.